Okay, thank you, Admin. So good evening again, everyone. Let's please stay muted if we're not speaking, so we can run through this session as productively as we can without interruptions, if that's okay. Thank you. My name is Tolu Yesufu, and I'll be taking us through product roadmap tonight. I know this was originally scheduled for the business analyst, but I really do appreciate the fact that the admins have, invited Scrum Masters to join this call tonight as well. Because as a Scrum Master as well, you might find yourself in a position at work where you are required to map out a product roadmap or a plan. Some people will call it a product plan or the product roadmap. We might touch a bit on the difference between like project plan and product roadmaps, but I just want us to focus more on product roadmap tonight. But it is essential and important for Scrum Masters as well to have an understanding of how to put together a roadmap. Even if you're not going to be putting one together or mapping one out or building a roadmap, it would be good for you to have an understanding of what it looks like and what the process is like and what a roadmap should have in it. So I'll move on very quickly. So again, tonight, of course, this topic is about roadmap. And some of the stuff that we'll be looking at tonight is what is a roadmap, a product roadmap, the goal and the purpose of a product roadmap. What types of product roadmaps do we have? We will touch on that very briefly as well. What should be included in your roadmap? Some tips on how to build a roadmap and some steps in creating your roadmap. I've tried to make it as simple as I can because, to be honest with you, it's not a difficult thing to put together. You just need to understand some of the basic things that it needs to entail, and you will be fine. Once you get your hands dirty on trying to put together a roadmap, practice makes perfect. As long as you understand the basic things that needs to go into a roadmap, the important things that needs to go into the purpose of putting it together, the little tips here and there and the steps, you will be fine. So I would try not to make it as complicated as I can. It's a simple slide that I've put together for tonight, just so that I don't make it too complicated. So, but please, if you do have any questions, please note your questions down, and I'll be happy to take questions at the end of the slide of the session. Now, what is a roadmap? A project roadmap, a product roadmap is a one-page graphical overview that presents high-level goals and deliverables on a timeline. And I will explain that in a bit. So it is incredibly useful. It's a useful tool that would help to manage stakeholders' expectations. So again, BAs, I know that with a lot of the things that you do, you will come across a lot of stakeholders. That's because you not only work as BAs with your team, but you work a lot with stakeholders as well. And from a session that we had a while back, it was about stakeholders' expectations. The roadmap is also another tool that you use in managing the stakeholders' expectations, whilst also communicating project objectives and project schedules with other teams that you might be working with or you might have dependencies with. Now, when you have a roadmap in hand, you and your stakeholders will have a better idea of the project scope and the potential issues to watch out for. And that's because on your project roadmap, some people have project roadmap, product roadmap, project plans that are well detailed. Now, when you talk about project plans, they sort of go into a bit more detail. You would hear more about project plans within the waterfall environment, waterfall projects. But within an agile project, you would hear more about product roadmap. Some organizations, even working within an agile environment, they still sort of have like project plans. But even at that, it's still advisable that you still have a roadmap, which is sort of like an high-level plan. The project plan is kind of like a well-detailed plan. So even with the organization that I work with right now, we work with project plan. We work within an agile environment, but we have a project plan and we have a roadmap. The project plan is a more detailed plan. You know, it has a couple more things that you might not necessarily have on a roadmap, because your roadmap is a high-level plan that you've put together. Although it would have everything in the project plan, but the project plan is a bit more detailed. Again, let me try not to complicate things too much for you. I'll make it as simple as I can, but please do feel free to ask your questions. Now, you would notice that somewhere here, I did mention deliverables at the top here. Just for the benefit of anyone on the call that isn't familiar with the terminology deliverables, I wouldn't want to assume, but just for the benefit, in case we have anyone on the call that is wondering, what are deliverables? What is a deliverable? So I will just quickly explain that. Now, project deliverables refers to all the outputs. It might be tangible, it might be intangible, that are submitted within the scope of a project. Now, the terminology might bring to mind that, oh, okay, so a deliverable is a final output that you submit at the end of your project. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily the final output that you submit at the end of your project, but it actually refers to any project-related outputs that you submit during any of the phase of your project. So it could be that you're working on a project that you have monthly releases, for example. Do you get what I mean? So it might be that at the end of January, you have a project deliverable that needs to be submitted. At the end of February, you have a project deliverable. At the end of March, it could be at any point in time. So it's not necessarily that at the end of the project is when you have a deliverable that you want to submit, either to stakeholders or to the business or to your line manager or to whoever is at the top there. So that is what a project deliverable is. It just refers basically to any output. It can be tangible or intangible. It could be just a document that needs to be submitted at any point during the phase of a project that needs to be submitted. It's a deliverable. Yeah. So what are examples of project deliverables? I think maybe let me just touch on that very quickly, because I've not touched on deliverables. So apologies if I slip away from the slide a little bit, because I've not touched on deliverables. Let me just explain a few examples about deliverables. So like I said, it can be tangible, it can be intangible. It can be internal, it can be external. And when we talk about internal, we're talking about within the organization that we're working with. We're talking about within the team that we're working with. When we talk about external, we're starting to look at third-party software providers that we might be working with. So an internal deliverable could be that maybe within your current role, you're leaving your current role. So I would simplify it as best as I can. So you're leaving your current role, and your human resource supervisor or manager or admin asks you to prepare like an handover documents for the next person that is coming on. Someone else is coming on, they've joined the team, they're taking over your role. You need to prepare a document. That document can be termed as an internal deliverable. I hope that sort of makes it a bit more simple in terms of clarification. Now, when we talk about an external deliverable, so let's say you're working with like an agency and you create like a website so let's say like an SEO agency, you create a website audit for your clients. Yeah, so we have like consultancy organizations that you do work with clients. You work with them, but you work with clients on different projects, and you need to create an audit, a website audit, for example, for that client to optimize their practices. Now, that audit that you're creating, that document is an external deliverable, because now you are preparing that document for an external body, like an external client. So I just wanted to make sure that I spoke about deliverables. I just wanted to touch on it very quickly. It's not like this session is not about deliverables, but the one thing that I've noticed is that sometimes we run sessions and we speak to people and we drop these different terminologies and people don't really understand what they are, and it just gets missing in transit like that. So I just wanted to make sure that I touch on that a little bit to explain it as best as I can. Now, a project roadmap again. So let's come back to project roadmap. It's the best way to summarize the what, the why, and the how of your project into an easy to understand document that can be shared with anyone. So remember that I said that with product roadmap, it's a high level road. Please, can we be muted, please? Because I want to try and run through this session within the time frame that we have. Thank you. So remember that I said that a product roadmap is sort of like a high level detail, like a high level plan. Yeah. So it does summarize the what are we doing? The why are we doing this? And the how do we plan to accomplish this objective? And all of these questions are answered inside that one easy to understand document. And that document should be shareable. You should be able to share it with stakeholders as well. You should be able to get on a call with stakeholders to share your roadmap, to explain to them, this is what the plan is, this is where we're at, this is where we're going to. Now, a project roadmap as well can be said to be a tool that maps out the project plans, the milestones, again, deliverables on a timeline. And the main purpose is to make sure that we're providing a high-level visual representation of the larger project plan. So remember that I said that even, within the waterfall environment, we hear a lot of project plan, project plan, project plan. But again, remember that I said that you would work in some agile environments with agile teams where you would still see or hear that they have project plans, but you would still have a product roadmap, a project roadmap, because that roadmap is sort of like a high-level plan, whereby your project plan itself is more, it goes into more detail, more granular details of the plan. Yeah, so that roadmap, I think someone is not muted. So that roadmap, the roadmap is a high-level visual representation of the larger project plan, and it explains the different phases, the what, the why, and the how. Your product plan also includes things like the scope, the risk. You might say you would come across different types of roadmaps. And it depends on what message you're trying to pass across, what project you're working on, and what level of detail you want to. But you want to make it as less complex as you can because of the stakeholders that you might be sharing it with. So when should you use a project roadmap, a product roadmap? So they should be used at any time that you have a project. Anytime there's a project, a program, or project portfolio that needs to be managed, a project roadmap or product roadmap should be created during the planning phase. They're used throughout the project as a tracking tool for everyone to check the progress of work. Stakeholders, project managers, product owners, business analysts, and even the team members. Okay, I'll move on to the next slide. So what is the purpose of a roadmap? The purpose of a roadmap is to visualize how you plan to meet your objectives. So remember that at the start of a project, you've already been given the mandate. You already understand what the vision of that project is. But then you need to look at it and you want to plan. This is the objective. This is the objective. This is a aim. This is a vision for this project. How do we plan to get from A to B to C to D to E to F? So the purpose of a roadmap, one, is to visualize how you plan to meet your objectives. When you have and understand the objectives of the business for the project, no matter how the objectives look, your roadmaps needs to show where you're going and how you're going to get there. So I want to go to the gym. My plan is to go to the gym tomorrow. And then I want to prepare a plan. And I want to make sure, because I'm working from home, I have a 2-hour free period in my calendar between 2 and 4 p.m. So I want to put together like a plan to say that between 2 and 4 p.m., I want to make sure I'm at the gym by 2 o'clock. And I want to leave the gym by 4 o'clock. That's my plan for tomorrow in regards to going to the gym. So what's my plan going to be like? I have a meeting from 9 to 9:30. I have this from this time to this time. How do I manage that process? How do I make sure that from the time I log into work in the morning, I'm able to achieve that goal of making sure I'm at the gym at 2 o'clock and leaving the gym at 4 o'clock? So I want to put that plan on a map, on a road map. I'm trying to make it as simple as I can. So I hope that is helping. So no matter how the business objectives for the product looks like, the roadmap needs to show where you are going and how you plan to get there. But please note, the product roadmap is not a static document. It can change. Remember, we're working in an agile environment, so we are flexible. We should be flexible, and things can change. And when things change, when requirements change, our product roadmap changes. When the scope of work changes, our product roadmap changes. Now, a good product roadmap also helps you to see the big picture. So it's one thing to have a vision, to say this is the vision for the project. This is the objective. This is what we're planning to do. This is what we want to do. This is what we want to achieve. We can keep jumping into meetings and calls and keep talking about it. When you put it on a roadmap, it helps you to see that big picture of what you're talking about. Because again, you have stakeholders sometimes that they dream big. They dream big. A stakeholder might tell you that they want to build a yacht on top of in the sky, in the clouds. They dream big. So sometimes when you have things like that, there are some things that we call the unrealistic requirements sometimes, So when you look at things like that, when you put together a roadmap, okay, this is the vision, this is your plan, this is your objective, this is what we're trying to do. You map it out on a roadmap, you present it to the stakeholders, it gives them a better understanding. They start to see the bigger picture of things. They tell you that we have this project, we want this delivered in 2 months. And this is what we want. Now, by the time you put it on a roadmap, you map it out for them, you put the timeline on that roadmap for the next 2 months, you put it in front of them, it starts to make help them see the bigger picture of what is achievable and what's not achievable. Again, the product roadmap helps to align with your development team on product goals and get stakeholders buy-in. So even when you put together a product roadmap, again, you want to make sure that you're not as a BA and as a Scrum Master, if you find yourself in a situation where you need to where you've been tasked or you're tasked with putting together a product roadmap, you want to make sure that you're not just going into your little silo cabin and doing it all by yourself and presenting it to the stakeholders. You want to make sure that it's something that is visible to the team as well. And again, Scrum Masters, it is possible that you might find yourself in that position. As a Scrum Master, I found myself in a position where even though we had a BA on the team, I had to take on the responsibility of putting together a product roadmap. You might be working with a BA that is not quite experienced. It might be a graduate. And you've said you're a Scrum Master with 5 years experience. You've worked with different teams on different projects. They would expect that you've seen a roadmap. There's no way you wouldn't have seen a roadmap. And so you might be of use to that BA to help that BA to start understanding how to map things out. Now, visibility into what is happening, what is changing, what is progressing. That's another purpose of putting a roadmap together. Like I said, your roadmap is not static. It's flexible. Things can change. And when things change, it should reflect on your roadmap. Whatever is happening within the product should be reflected in your roadmap. Whatever progress you're making should be reflected in your roadmap. Whatever dependencies you have, you can reflect that in your roadmap as well. Because if you have a milestone in place, if you have a plan in place to say, by the end of February, this is what we would want to have achieved, and you're moving close to the end of February, and you already can see that there's a risk to us actually delivering within that time frame or for the end of February, then you want to start understanding what the delay to that progress is. And the roadmap helps to do that as well. Okay, let me run through very quickly. Now, again, I'm going to run through this one very quickly. I've just put this on the slide, not because that you might necessarily need it, but again, you never know. The IT world evolves every day. And as BAs especially, you might find yourself getting a role as a BA where, solution the analyst, system, different BA roles with different BA terminologies, and you never know what you will come by. So I'll just run through this very quickly. And this is something that I came across as well. Types of roadmaps. So you have the marketing strategy. Now, the marketing strategy roadmap outlines the market in which you will launch and promote your products. It will also show how you will develop your product over time to meet your customers' needs. Marketing strategy. Now, as a BA, you know that you're employed not only because a business, maybe the business or the organization has, they're trying to make a decision on something, or they're trying to develop or build something, they need someone to help them with that decision. It's very possible that the reason why you've been employed as a BA is because they want to build something, but they're not quite sure on which way to go. So they're thinking, should we build in-house or should we buy? So they want you to come in as a BA to start from that process, helping them understand. If we build in-house, what would that look like for us? Cost, budget-wise, and market strategy-wise, and all of that. If we decide to buy, what does that look like for us, cost-wise, and all of that? So you start to look at different areas. You start to look at the competitors out there. What are they doing? What is out there? How can we meet up with this? How can we compete with this? How can we do better? How can you? And when you're doing all of this, you start to look into different marketing strategies out there, understanding your customers' needs. And you want to, like I said, I just put a plan together very quickly now with regards to me going to the gym, working from home. I wanted to go to the gym. You can put together a roadmap for that. You can have a roadmap for that. Yeah, and listening to your customers as they use the products would also be super useful for you when working with a marketing strategy. Now, moving on very quickly, we have the visionary, a visionary roadmap. That visually represents, from the name, that visually represents the changes that are happening within your industry and your society at large. So that indicates the trends in different areas and describes how the company's product will fit into the big picture and remain relevant. So you would see that, again, as BAs, this is you putting together a roadmap. You might find yourself in a situation where you're working in an organization as a BA, and you would need to put together a roadmap that would look at the trends in different areas, the trends that describes how your company's product will fit into the bigger picture. So even as BAs, you would find yourself in situations whereby you need to do like market research, different research that you would need to do. And this is not just textbook. I've found myself in that position as well before, where like half of my day I'm doing research online. I'm speaking to third-party software vendors. I'm trying to look at, should we build, should we buy? What does this look like? What would this look like? What's best for the company? How do I present this back to the business and the stakeholders? How do I help them to make a decision on this? We have the technology roadmap. Now, the technology roadmap helps companies to plan future initiatives regarding their technical infrastructure. So these initiatives can be narrow in scope. So like when the IT team needs to roll out updates for their software. Yeah, so this might, I'm hoping that this is not too confusing, but I just wanted to make sure that I touch on this because I've had BAs that have actually gotten roles and, as BAs, it's not all the roles that you get that you would need to write user stories and acceptance criteria. You might find yourself in a BA role where what they've employed you as a BA for is like a process change BA, where you just look at the processes in place. You want to help them to improve the processes and things like that. There are different roles out there and you never know where you will find yourself. So these are things that I just thought might be useful. We have the platform roadmap, which outlines the technical specifications needed for your product or services to run successfully. So for example, Windows operating software, it needs hardware to run on, or else no one has any use for that product. And then we have the products, internal and external product maps, which sketches out the evolution of the product. And I think this might be one that might be more familiar to you or more useful to you. But again, let's not throw in the bin the other ones that we've spoken about. So the internal roadmaps details the development priorities among your teams, helping to get everyone on the same page, which is what, again, like I said, you might be familiar with as your product roadmap. Okay. Moving on. The product road mapping process. Now, agile product roadmaps often goes amiss when they are not built properly. It's one thing for us to talk about building a roadmap, but it's another thing for us to actually build a roadmap and build the roadmap properly. So no matter the approach you use for your roadmap, there are some general principles that I would say you would need to have in place to ensure that your roadmap is of high quality. So I've put together some steps to take when building an effective roadmap. So generally, it would look like this. So I'll go to the next slide. Okay, so you have break down your project scope. Now, when building your roadmap, your project scope is the sum of all your project tasks. What's the scope of this project? What's the scope? What's in scope? What's out of scope? Whatever is out of scope doesn't even need to come into your roadmap anyway. So in other words, okay, the work to be performed in the project. That is why defining your project scope is the first step when you're creating your roadmap. You need to understand the vision. You need to understand the scope. There's no point when you've been told that something is out of scope, there's really no point adding it into your roadmap. It's a waste of time. It's just going to completely throw your roadmap anyway. If something is not in scope, why would it be on your roadmap? So as you will need to know what project activities need to be done before drafting a timeline. So you can put a timeline in place. But what's the whole purpose of having that timeline if you don't even understand the activities that needs to take place, the task that needs to be completed? So we have the link task dependencies. Now, again, on your roadmap, another thing that you might have or you might be seeing on roadmaps, again, you would see different types of roadmaps out there. Some are well detailed than others. Some are really, really high level. And some are kind of like a bit more low level. So even in your roadmap, you will see roadmaps where you need to identify task dependencies. Yeah, and this determines the order in which the task needs to be executed. So of course, before I get in my car to drive to the gym, yeah, I need to do something. If I don't do that thing, I won't be able to accomplish even getting to the car. So even getting in my car to go to the gym, I'm dependent on making sure that I can even find the car keys in the first place. If I can't find the car keys, I ain't going nowhere. So you would find that in some roadmaps, you would have dependencies on your roadmaps. Stay flexible. So with your roadmaps, yeah, like I said earlier on, roadmaps can change over time. And that is based on several factors. So your access to resources can fluctuate. You might have like a competitor that releases a similar product. So if you work with an organization that is quite competitive and they have lots of competitors out there, and you've already have a plan in place to release maybe a plane that can how would I put it now? That can fly and at the same time do different kind of displays, roll over whilst flying and stuff like that. I know we don't want to, nobody wants to get in such a plane, but that might be the plan and the objective to say, we want to do something different. We want to build this thing. But then you have a competitor that has already done the exact thing. And then you're thinking, the business is thinking, okay, this is something we wanted to break into the market with and do something different. And these guys have beat us to it. So let's add a tweak to what we are doing. Let's do something different. Let's add something different to ours as well. So you should leave room to accommodate sudden changes. You should make sure that you're flexible with your roadmap. This way, you're active and not reactive. Yeah. So let's make sure that, again, with our roadmaps can be. So don't go into your places of work and create a roadmap and say, and then when changes come, you're like, oh, no, we've created the roadmap. We can't change anything. No, we're not working within a waterfall environment. That's waterfall is different from agile. So with agile, we can be flexible. Choose the type of roadmap. So again, like I mentioned earlier on, there are several different types of roadmaps that exist, and each one displays different information. So for example, the marketing strategy roadmap focuses on the market impact on the product. On the other hand, a visionary, let me see, is it visionary now? Yeah, a visionary roadmap helps you to shape your business strategy on how a product might fit in the big picture. So your choice of roadmap should actually reflect your target audience. Prioritize the right teams. There are many aspects to consider when you're also developing a product roadmap. For example, when you're building your product roadmap, make sure that you're including every little thing that can make a cluttered document that does more harm than good. So what I'm trying to say is that don't think that because we have all these activities that we need to plan for that needs to go in our product roadmap, then you dump everything in there. It's good that it's more useful that you prioritize the right teams, the right things. You would find that there are some roadmaps that you look at and, they start from creating, they have the themes, then the epics, then the features, then the different activities and all of that. But to be honest with you, for myself, I start from using the epics, which is also okay, as long as you are actually prioritizing and putting the right things on your roadmaps. So like the themes are like the main strategic objectives that you hope to achieve with your product or service. Once you've determined your themes, you can then break them down into epics and then break them down into the activities. But you'll find some roadmaps, which again is not bad practice, that will start off from the epics and then break them down into the different activities. Another one is identifying the deliverables. Again, like I mentioned earlier on, I've already explained what deliverables is or what deliverables are. Make sure that, when you're building your product roadmap, you understand what the different deliverables are. Again, you would have some roadmaps, again, like I said, I will show you a couple of roadmaps, examples of roadmaps, some templates. And that would show you that you can actually create different templates of roadmaps as long as you capture what needs to be captured. Now, when you go into calls with stakeholders and you want to present your roadmap to stakeholders for them to understand what you've put on there, what your progress is like, and, you know, the different timelines and milestones. Oh, by this time we would have achieved this, or we would have achieved that. You don't want to really put in front of.
Somebody's
Sorry?
camera is on.
Okay. I'm not saying that. I'm sure the admin would look into that. Admin, do we want to, please, if your camera is on, can you turn it off, please? Okay, I'll continue. Thank you. So you want to make sure that, you know, when you're putting to in front of stakeholders, you go on a call with stakeholders to give them progress updates, and you put up your roadmap in front of. You don't want to put up roadmap that goes into deep level of details. You would see some plans, like I said, some organizations would have roadmaps, and you will still have your plan, which is even more detailed. Over some those project plans, sometimes when you look at them, it goes as granular as even having some names of who is carrying out what activity. You really don't want to present that in front of stakeholders. They don't have the time. You want to make sure that you're going into that call, and what you want them to see is progress that you've made. You want them to see that on the timeline, and you want them to say what the different deliverables and timelines are. So again, I've explained deliverables at the start of the course, so I wouldn't really dwell on that. Now, present roadmaps to stakeholders. So I think we've touched on that as well very briefly. So you should, as BAs, you should, as Scrum Masters, if you find yourself in that position, have the confidence to present your team, you know, to present your product roadmap rather, with stakeholders, with the organization. You should have that confidence to present it in front of them. So product roadmaps, project roadmaps, whatever you want to call it, they are not documents that you prepare and you just hide them in a corner for your own use alone. These are documents that you might have to present to your line managers, to your product managers, to your product owners, to your stakeholders. And understanding what needs to go in them, understanding how to put them together, how to map them out would also help a lot, which is why we're having this session. And it would, you know, you should have that confidence to be able to run through with stakeholders. Communicate organizational product goals to your team. Again, like I said, you should be able to help facilitate the creation of the product roadmap. So BAs, Scrum Masters, again, you might find yourself in that situation where you need to facilitate the creation of that roadmap. Like I mentioned earlier on, avoid dictating it to your team. You should start by ensuring that you have in-depth understanding of the company vision and customers' needs. If you don't have an understanding of the vision or the objectives, then whatever you're putting together is not a roadmap, because the objectives will go into that roadmap. So if you don't have an understanding, so even as Scrum Masters, you're not just there to facilitate. You need to understand. Even as a Scrum Master, I work very closely with my business analyst. Very closely with my business analyst. Very closely. And I emphasize on very, very closely. Do you get what I mean? There's nothing that my BA discusses with stakeholders or gets from stakeholders in terms of requirements that I don't know about. Yeah, so let's make sure that we have an understanding of that for us to even be able to put together a roadmap and even communicate that to our team members as well. Because your team members should also be able to have a look at the roadmap. It's not a hidden document. It helps them to also understand what the goals are. Where are we on this project? What are the plans? Where are we going? Where are we heading? You know, do we have any dependencies? Do we have any risk? They need to also be able to see that plan. Yeah, set project milestones. So on your product roadmap, even on the project plan, you will see it as well. But on your product roadmap as well, you know, it's good for you to set different milestones. Yeah, it's good to set different milestones. The milestones itself, it's different from deliverables. So let's not mix milestones and deliverables together. Let's not mix them up. They're different. Okay, so the milestone is basically in short to say that at this point, this is what we want to have achieved. By the end of February, this is what we want to have achieved. We want to reach this milestone. We want to achieve this milestone by the end of February. By the end of March or the middle of March, we want to be able to reach this milestone. We want to be able to achieve this milestone. Yeah, it could be reaching a release date. It could be that. That is also a milestone. Ensure that your roadmap is clear. So a roadmap, again, is a roadmap's primary purpose is to provide information on the company's product strategy and the stages necessary to stay on track. So making your roadmap stand out involves things like, prioritizing the use of interesting visuals. You want to make sure that it's engaging, it's clear and simple to understand, and it's, your stakeholders are able to engage more, of course, when things are clear and compelling. You don't want to bore them with a massive document. That's why I said, so for me, I have like a product roadmap, like a project roadmap that is well detailed in terms that I have risk on it, I have dependencies on it, I have activities on it, the timeline is there, the roles, different roles I have. This is something that the data architect should have achieved by this point. This is what this person should have achieved. That I have different sign-off processes, sign-off timelines on it. But then I have another one. I have a product roadmap that doesn't have so much all of those details. That is high level, straight to the point, clear, that I can present to a stakeholder and I can just read through, walk a stakeholder through, and, easy does it. They understand where I'm coming from and where I'm going to. Now, what should be included in the roadmap? So I've just put together some of the things that you should include that you can find in a roadmap. Again, like I mentioned earlier on, you have the project goals, the visions, and the objectives. So the main thrust of any project roadmap is the high-level goals and objectives of the project. So it is the vision of what is desired and the potential that it has to be a great product. Yeah, the initial vision does not have to be the final one, but it starts the process of building your roadmap. Once you have that initial vision in place, it helps you to start that process. It helps you to kick off that process of building a product roadmap. Again, like I said, it's not a static document. In Agile, you should be flexible with it. So the understanding of the initial vision of that project helps you to kickstart that process of putting together a roadmap. And then further planning can continue. Now, project risk is another thing that, can be included in your roadmap. Again, like I said, I have more detailed stuff like this in like the product plan or the project plan or whatever. But if there are risks that needs to be highlighted, even on your high level product roadmap, then by all means, of course, you can put them on it. Risks are not things that you want to sit on. The moment they start to rear their heads, you want to start putting them out there. So you can state the main project risk that could make your project fail or compromise major elements of the project plan. So things like the scope, you might have risk that would affect the scope of the product or the project, the schedule of the project, the goals of the project, the stakeholders' expectations, the QA, with the quality assurance of the product. You can have risk that can affect any part of the delivery of your product. And like I said, risks are not things that you want to sit on. They're things that once they start to rear their head, the moment they start to rear their head, you want to start highlighting them. So even on my high level roadmap, I have risk. I have my risk on there. Then the project timeline. The project timeline overview includes your project milestones and deliverables. So you can, it's a timeline to say, within this time and this time, we're starting the project here. At this time, we'll handle the project at this time. You draw up a timeline to reflect, the different phases of your project. Yeah, so that's another thing. So we're starting in January. We're starting January the 5th. We're ending September the 8th. So you want to put that timeline on your roadmap, and the different activities, what you want to work on at this time, what you want to achieve at this time, what milestone you want to achieve at that time. So the project timeline can also go on your roadmap. Again, task dependencies. So you want to be able to identify dependencies based on the task that you've mapped out on your roadmap, on your timeline. Yeah. So if you have any dependencies that you've highlighted on your roadmap, to say you have a dependency with maybe an external body, or you have a dependency with another team, and you've highlighted that on your roadmap, you want to identify the different tasks, that needs to be carried out on that or dependency of those dependencies. So creating your roadmap, using whatever tool. Again, I will explain the different tools that I know that you can use to create roadmaps. It helps with that as well. So it helps with visibility as well. To be honest, it helps with visibility. Do you get what I mean? So as a BA, or even as a Scrum Master putting this together, things like risk, things like dependencies, you don't just want to note them down on a Word document somewhere and keep them for your own. No, they're not there. They're not kept for your own use. Because especially when you have things like dependencies, that means you're dependent on something else. You're dependent on someone else. You're dependent on another team. You're dependent on another department, or you're dependent on an external body. You want to make sure that all those dependencies are mapped out so that you can track the progress. You want to understand when is Tolu's team starting to grind pepper. Yeah. I know my British colleagues will call it pepper. Yeah. So when is Tolu's team going to start grinding the pepper, so that Ben's team can start to get the pot ready to boil the pepper? So something like that. So I'm just trying to use very similar things that we do on our day-to-day to relate to things like this for better understanding. So you want to make sure that those dependencies are mapped out as well. Then you have strategy. Strategy is the case that you build for your product. So you want internal and external stakeholders to know the overall business goal of your project. So explaining how this product is going to benefit the business and blend with the vision that is already set out. So once these things are aligned, the roadmap is used to keep that strategy moving forward and staying consistent. Even when there's a change, even when things need to move around, once you are aligned, you use your roadmap to keep the strategy together. Requirements, and I'm sure that's a familiar terminology to even the BAs and the Scrum Masters. So you need to get information to outline your needs, the user's needs, the business needs. So you want to talk to your sales team, you want to talk to your customer service group, you're talking to stakeholders and the business. They need to know your end users feel about the product. What are the needs? What are the requirements? What are they looking for? What are the different feature requests that the business has, that the users have? That would help you to determine the different features that needs to be prioritized within the different releases. So once you have the understanding, you've gotten your requirements, you've analyzed your requirements, you've prioritized your requirements, those requirements that have been prioritized, because you can't have a roadmap, for example, and then you have requirements for login, for registration, for homepage and things like that. And then you've been told that the login is priority that you need to start working on first. and then you want to start working on logging within your first sprint in January, and then you go on your roadmap, you put logging on the second sprint in January. It doesn't tally. Yeah, it doesn't tally. So you want to make sure that once your requirements have been gathered, your requirements have been, because BAs, I'm sure you know that it's not only about gathering requirements and prioritizing them. For you to even be able to write stories and acceptance criteria, once you get your requirements, you should analyze your requirements. There are steps, different steps to this thing. So you get your requirements, you analyze your requirements, you have your requirements prioritized, and then you're able to map them out on your product roadmap. We have the markers. So I've put the markers there. So the markers are quite important when it comes to keeping everyone in the loop about timing. So even though sometimes you might work on projects where you don't have sort of like exact dates, but knowing where the markers are to keep track of the progress of the work is important to moving forward. These markers, they can be adjusted. Again, remember that I said the roadmap can be flexible. Yeah, so they can be adjusted. It's just like setting your different milestones on your different roadmaps, on your different timelines. When things change, things move around. But showing on your roadmaps where they are set, where these markers are set, would enable people, would enable the stakeholders of the team to check on the timelines when they need to, the different timelines, what have changed. You know, we had something planned for second week in January. It's been moved to the end of January. What has changed? So we want to have those different markers. So these are some of the things that should be included in your roadmap. Yeah. Okay. So I have here a picture. So again, so let me just run through very quickly to say that when you're putting together a roadmap, there are different templates that you can use to put together a roadmap. You can use Excel. You can use even PowerPoint slide. You can use PowerPoint slide to create a high-level roadmap. You can use different whiteboards. And I know that Deji mentioned something about the Miro board recently to you guys. You can use, Miro board is a whiteboard. Mural board is a whiteboard. You have a whiteboard on Zoom now. You have a whiteboard on Teams. You know, there are different products out there now that are starting to build whiteboards into their product, because whiteboard is a big thing out there now. And it's a massive tool that would be really, really useful, not just to BAs, but Scrum Masters as well, because you can use it for workshops, Scrum Masters. BAs, you can use it for workshops as well. Yeah, so this is there's something that, I don't know if anyone is familiar with project management. There's something we call the Gantt chart. Yeah, it's a Microsoft, I think it's like a Microsoft tool for project management. But you can use that to create a roadmap. You can use it to create a plan. Yeah, so like the image I'm showing you right now, you know, you have the project phases in there. You know, the project phases in there shows the development, testing, the development and the testing stages of the product. You know, you have the milestones in there as well. So you can see when you look at something like this, it's usually represented on a chart like this, on a template like this, using a diamond shape. That's where you have like a milestone. You know, you have your different tasks already highlighted on there as well. You have dependencies. So when you use a tool like this to create a plan or a roadmap, you know, you usually have this sort of arrows that are linking, that, you know, sort of identifies, or, you know, the different dependencies that represents the different dependencies on there. You know, sometimes, again, like I said, like I have with my detailed project plan at work, we have even the names as well, the different roles to say the data engineer should be able to should have completed this particular task within this particular time frame. You know, and of course, again, you have the time there. You have the timeline there as well. Yeah, another template that I've got on here is also sort of like a roadmap. So I've seen this called like a hybrid roadmap, which is the type of roadmap that includes the dates, but they're not hard dates. Again, flexible. So for example, a company might create a roadmap that is organized by month or quarter. So you might see some roadmaps that are like Q1. By the end of Q1, this is what, in Q1, this is what we want to do. By the end of Q1, this is what we want to achieve. Q2, this is what we want to do. And by the end of Q2, this is what we want to achieve. Q3, Q4, they map out their roadmaps in quarters. So they either activities are plotted by month and so different sort of roadmaps. I have another one here as well, which is like I'm sure that this might look familiar to people, but for me personally, guys, I'm not a fan of roadmaps that don't have timelines on them. I like roadmaps that when you create them, you have the timeline on. It could either be timeline based on month, it could be based on sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, the 2-weekly sprint or 1-weekly sprint or 3-weekly sprint or 4-weekly sprint, or even the quarters as well. That's how I don't do my timelines and my roadmaps without dates. Yeah, this is another template of a roadmap. And then this is another one. Again, you would see that they're quite similar, but a bit different. But they're quite similar, but they're capturing the same thing. So usually on this side, when you see roadmaps like this, on this side, you would usually see things like the themes that I talked about earlier. You would see like epics, that I spoke about earlier as well, depending on how you map out your roadmap. So you would see this is another example of another roadmap as well. I don't know if this is familiar. So you would see that you have the milestones at the top here. And again, you have the different, maybe like epics or themes that needs to be completed. And then you have the activities mapped out on the timeline as well. That is to show to you that, there is no one, how would I put it now? You can create your roadmap using any template. You might work in an organization where they have a particular template that they use, but you might work in an organization that is quite flexible, where you can create your roadmap on a whiteboard, on PowerPoint slide, or Excel sheets. Do you get what I mean? It's in project management that you would usually see roadmaps being created, project plans being created strictly on like Excel sheets. But in Agile, of course, again, we're flexible. So different templates that you can use in creating your different roadmaps. I'm not doing any practical session. If I had time, maybe I would have just roughly put together like a quick high-level roadmap for you guys now, but there isn't time for that. So I think what I would suggest, and again, guys, I would say that sometimes we can't do it all for you. It's good that you have an understanding of what needs to be done, and then you go out there, you get your hands dirty and practice. The more you practice, the more you have better understanding. It's one thing for me to actually create a high-level roadmap for you on this call, and that means I've done it for you. You're just going to watch what I'm doing. It might be helpful, but sometimes when you actually do it yourself, make a mistake, try again, make a mistake, try again, it goes a long way. To help you better understand how to create your own roadmaps. Yeah, so thanks, guys. I finished 10 o'clock on the dot. Oh, 10:01. All right. Any question?
Please. I have like 2 questions. So I don't know if you can hear me. Can you?
Yes, I can hear you.
I just want to ask you, like, just like Confluence, is there any place on Azure DevOps where we can create something like a roadmap?
Okay. So to answer that, I've worked with Jira before, where we actually use there's this thing on Jira where once you create your epics and your stories and stuff like that, and you start moving them along, it just automatically there's a timeline, there's a plan, on Jira. I'm not sure if you will get it on a free version of Jira. but it was a company version, so I'm sure it was a paid-for version, and they have lots of different features in there, that functionalities in there. And once you move your stories and epics along, it automatically creates it for you, and then you can use that as a plan if you want to, if that's what your organization is using. With regards to Azure DevOps, I know that we have gone through Azure DevOps before, and we've seen a plan on there as well. So it might be something that is worth looking into, but I know that we've seen something on Azure DevOps before. When, at the initials, I think that was when I started working with Azure DevOps on this platform. I know that we did go through it, and yeah, I believe that there's something on Azure DevOps that can that helps to map out your plan as well. But the thing is, you can look into that, get familiarized with that, but again, familiarize yourself with creating your own roadmaps as well. Don't rely so much as in relying on tools like Jira and Azure DevOps. Again, familiarize yourself with those ones, but don't rely 100%, because you might work in an organization where you might need to just create your own high-level roadmap for stakeholders, to present to stakeholders, and you don't want to start opening your Jira board or Azure board to do that. I hope that helps.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, the second question is just about the releases. So, when to release, I know, Agile is different from Waterfall. So, and I know, in Agile, we do more of like a sprint. So, is it at the end of every sprint, or there is actually maybe a release can be maybe in 2 months
Okay, so
or
to
in 3
answer
months?
that, yeah. So to answer that, releases is another topic on its own that I'm not going to go into tonight. But I will answer that question on a high level as best as I can. So your releases depends on not just the organization, or it could be dependent on the projects that you're working on. Whatever. So before you even have releases, you should have had like a release process in place that has been agreed with your stakeholders, with the team as well. Do you get what I mean? So when you have a release process in place, then you know when you're having your releases. So you might have project teams that actually release every sprint. So at the end of a sprint, they release. At the end of a sprint, they release. Now you might have teams that they release every month. So even if they have 2 weekly sprints, in a month, they would have completed 2 sprints within 4 weeks. And then at the end of that month, they have a release. Now, you can have an organization or a team or project team where your release process is to release every 3 months. Do you get what I mean? So it depends on what that release plan looks like, or what that release process looks like. But yes, you might have teams where you actually release every sprint. It could be every sprint, it could be every month, it could be every quarter. So it differs. Yeah? Does that answer your question?
And if that is the situation, please, does that affect the UAT as well?
It doesn't affect the UAT as far as I'm concerned. So if you have a release process in place, you know what your release process is. You have a plan for your UAT as well. So again, UAT process can differ, but you want to make sure, again, best practice, and what I usually push for is that, even if you're having a release at the end of every sprint, that means that within that sprint, you've carried out development, you've carried out testing, you've carried out UAT. Because again, your UAT is like there's this other word that we call it, I can't remember now. But your UAT is like a double check, like a double verification kind of thing, check on what the QAs have checked already. So if the QAs check something, they've tested, they've passed a particular feature or functionality, you don't just want to release it to the users like that. You want to make sure that you do like another verification check, which is your UAT check. So even if you're doing a monthly release, or you're doing a release at the end of your sprint, you want to try and make sure that you carry out your development, your QA testing, your UAT testing, because you're releasing at the end of that sprint. So you want to make sure that you check all of these boxes before you release to the users. And that is not to say that even after UAT, there's nothing concrete to say that the users might still not find a few bugs here and there. But again, you just want to make sure that you do that double check. If you know any release that you're making, it's just good to have that those checks in place. So it doesn't affect it. It's just making sure that you know that we're releasing at the end of every sprint. So you want to make sure that you incorporate that process into your development process, if that helps.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jubril.
All right, thank you, Tolu. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask, during the planning process, who participate? Do the stakeholders, do they participate in the process?
What do you mean by planning process?
You're talking about the roadmap planning. So when you are doing the processing, doing the planning of the roadmap, you said the BA can do it, or the Scrum Master may also find themselves in doing it. So the question is that, do the stakeholder, do they participate, or just the BA or Scrum Master?
Okay. Yeah, so the stakeholder will not necessarily create your roadmap for you. So remember that your roadmap is created based off the objective of that project and based off the requirements that you have for that project. So your understanding of all of this is what you would put into your roadmap, that you would use to create your roadmap. But then you can go ahead and share your roadmap with stakeholders. You can share it with your team. You can share it with your product owner, your product manager. In fact, you should make it visible to these people. They should have visibility of it. But your stakeholder or the business is not going to create that roadmap for you. You will create that roadmap, based on your understanding of this is the what that we're trying to do. This is the why that we're doing it, and this is how we plan to carry it out, or the how that we're aiming to achieve that goal or that objective. So if you find yourself, like I said, I found myself in the situation as a Scrum Master where my line manager have said, "Oh, can you put together in fact, not just me, actually, Scrum Masters on all the projects, we were told, oh, Scrum Masters, can you put together a roadmap?" And we had BAs on our different teams. Do you get what I mean? So even though I questioned it later, yeah, I still went ahead and did it. Yeah. You get what I mean? So I'm not going to say stakeholders should do it, because again, as a Scrum Master, I should understand. Not everyone on your team should understand what the vision of that project is. And everyone should have an understanding of the roadmap, of the plan. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? How do we plan to do it? So yeah, as a BA, you would be putting your product roadmap together. Again, as a BA, you might be lucky and your product owner takes it as his or her responsibility to put the roadmap together. But again, it is good that you have an understanding, because it might fall on your table.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I don't think we have any other question. So thanks, guys. I'm just looking to see if I have any questions, and no, I haven't. All right, cool. So I hope that has helped, guys, and thank you for joining the session tonight. And that is me done, admin.
Sorry, hello?